Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Geek Speak. Today, our topic is website redesign, when and how to refresh your site. Um, Excited about this um, topic, and I think Rena is too. While she is sharing in the group, Rena, you can let me know when you're done that. Um,
Thanks.
we're basically going to go through all the things that you should consider, think about um, when you're to maybe refresh your website. Should you refresh your website? Is it a refresh or a web design? All of these types of things so that your site keeps you up to date, keeps your business looking right, and hopefully we'll give some good feedback here. Are we ready to? Yeah.
I
Okay.
Yeah,
So
we're fine. We're live.
I'm Greg with Original 72 Creative, and with us today for this topic is
Rena from Little Works Indie Media, and I feel like I have a little bit of a lag, so I'm going to try and close some things down.
could
All
be.
right. All right, Greg, do you want to get us started on some of our topics that we were? Yeah, I definitely have a lag because this is a big empty space.
Oh. Okay. Yeah. So I think when I finish a sentence, is it not finished when you hear me?
Well, yes, of course, I hear the end of your sentence, but I think I'm getting the end of your sentence quite late. Did that sound right? Did I respond
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Then it just feels weird on
Sounds
this.
fine. Sounds
Okay,
fine to
no
me.
problem.
Yeah.
Okay, I closed a lot of things down, so hopefully that'll help.
Yeah, so let's jump in. The reason for this topic is I think for me, I notice people have increasingly outdated sites, and I don't think it's something they think about. They're thinking about their daily business and everything that they need to do, and sometimes the website um, lags behind. It's like the last on the list of maybe things to think about. So sometimes when you're looking around at sites, your site might become a little bit stale, or like in the aspect of um, there's always new things that you can do. There's new trends.
Yeah.
There's new technologies that allow you to do things in certain ways. So there's some dead giveaways of items that you can look at to see whether or not your site might need a redesign or a refresh. And we'll go through those today.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that I find interesting is especially if you're actually utilizing trends, like particular trends when you've done your site, then those tend to go outmoded quite quickly. But if you're using more classical design features and things that have been in design for a long time, then your site doesn't go out quite so much, but it will because of just the nature of technology and the changes that happen. I even remember having a client and they kept saying that their site was shrinking. And what was happening is they had an HTML site, and and every time you have like better screens, the pixels get smaller. So if you build an image that has like 400 pixels or 800 pixels, and maybe 800 pixels was fine across the screen at one point, but it's definitely not now. So then the pixels go like this, and then they've got their little image and text in the sort of the top left corner, and then this big white blank space. So that's like a really extreme case. But it could be as simple as, there's some fonts that come out and they're really beautiful, or Photoshop um, filters that you can use, and everybody goes crazy and uses them, and it looks like, it's like when you design your kitchen and you use something that's new and exciting, and then 5 years down the road everybody has it, and it's considered passe at that point. So we're
Hmm.
going to talk about refresh and redesign. So Greg, what's the difference in your mind between a refresh and redesign? Because I use those terms quite separately, and I want to know if
So
other designers do
before
too.
before we get into that, I have 7 things that I've
Okay.
come up
Okay.
with uh, to help you decide whether or not you need a refresh or a redesign. We can quickly go through that and then on. So number one was, does your website look outdated or unprofessional to you? And if it does, obviously it might be time for a redesign. We talked about this. If it's not mobile friendly, it's
Oh
time
yeah,
for
that's
a
good.
redesign. um, a third is if your website is slow.
Hmm.
Um, that could signify that you've had your site for a long time, you've populated it with a lot of stuff, and maybe it hasn't had any care in keeping it running quickly. So if you feel your site is slow, could be time for a redesign or a refresh. Um, 4 would be more with the leads or sales. If you seem to not be getting leads and sales anymore, that might be an indication it's time to relook and see what you're doing. Maybe not a redesign, but definitely a refresh of your content and things like that.
Or just check
Um,
to make sure that your buttons are working. That's
Yeah,
the first
true.
thing I
I've
do.
had many times I've talked to a client just to follow up with them, be like, "Oh, hey, how's everything doing?" And they're like, "Yeah, we don't get that many form submissions anymore." So,
Yeah,
like, we test the form
exactly.
and they're not getting them because maybe it's going to
Yes.
spam or like something changed. And I'm like,
Yes.
I wish you would, bring these things up sooner because how many
Yes.
times has someone submitted something and now you've just lost that?
Yeah, I had a client that had their contact form not working for 6 months, we discovered. And
Wow.
this was before she became a client. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this should have been the first question. Yeah, I don't get any contact form submissions anymore. I'm like, oh, let's check that out. And sure enough, it had been about 6 months and not working. And these things can happen because of WordPress updates. That doesn't, if you're not updating your plugins, and sometimes the plugins no longer, they conflict with the code on the WordPress, and that makes them to stop work. So it's not like somebody's gone and done something. It's usually just software not behaving properly with each other, or you're not updating your software regularly.
Mhm.
um, and then same with the phone calls. If the phone calls are done, then make sure that the links, the live, the link button on the phone call is working, because that's the easiest way to do phone calls from mobile.
Mhm.
um, yeah, and then the other thing I wanted to say is that's another reason actually to make sure, or sorry, one of the indicators when you were saying that it's slow is that, are you having a developer go onto your site and check your software monthly to make sure that everything's working? Because chances are you're not updating properly if your site is slow. That's the first thing to start with, is making sure your themes are updated and all that.
Mhm.
All right. So I think, did you
Yeah,
get
we had
through?
the five
Yeah.
here is basically if you have a difficult time updating the site or updating the content and images, might be time.
Yeah.
Um,
Error
and
message.
if anything's changed in your business or your business has grown,
Yes.
obviously that would be an indication of like making sure your site matches how your business has changed or grown. Big
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
And a last one I threw in here quick. Um, if you avoid sending people to your website because you're embarrassed, it's time for a redesign.
Yeah, that's true. I'm right there. I'm right there. So we're doing a big redesign at the moment, and I was actually quite surprised to see how much business changes we had, and how my process is not expressly written about on there, so the clients aren't really clear about how it's going to work. All sorts of things I found, and so it's a really good idea to do that for yourself regularly. Is go check your site
Hmm.
because it's true. People, you're right. People do get busy in their own business, and they get the site up and launched, and then it's like, okay, once and done, and now you never have to look at it again. But that's actually not the case. I recommend checking in regularly, especially if you don't have anyone outside of your within your organization or outside of your organization, and it's there with the express function of checking that for you and keeping on top of things. So that's a good
Yeah,
idea.
yeah,
Right on. So let's talk about the differences between redesign and refresh then.
yeah. Do you want me to go on that, or do you have something to say right away?
Um, yeah, I mean, there is a bit of overlap with the way that those terms are used. A refresh for me doesn't include all of the pages. It usually includes the home page and then some key pages, updates. And usually, when I do a refresh, I'm also updating the software so that it's optimizing the software so that it's running faster because you don't want to just concern yourself with designing content. You want to make sure you're hitting that software stuff. Whereas a redesign is like a whole, like we're starting from scratch. We're gonna maybe not completely change everything. I have done a redesign where the branding was pretty much similar, and if you were a client of this of our clients, then you might not notice a huge and significant difference
Hmm.
from the visuals because it wasn't that different. But the software was changed out. We completely changed the theme of the site so it works better. We kept she really liked her branding. She really liked the look of her site. Her offerings had changed, so we changed the services page extensively. We changed every piece of it, so that includes the header and the footer and all of it. A refresh to me is we don't change everything. We change key elements to
Hmm.
just to give it an update and make it more representative of the work. We might not change the theme. We might just update the theme, um, those types of things. So those to me are very separate. And a redesign often also in my world includes a refresh on the branding. So it might include a few new colors in the palette. It might be an update with the font selection. It might be an even an update on the logo where we're not changing it completely, but we might, sort of finesse it a little bit and maybe update the font on the logo, that type of thing to bring it, make sure it doesn't, if it looks dated, because sometimes when you use a font at one point, even if it's not a fancy font, just like a really basic business style font, they can
Hmm.
still go out of date and look dated. So when we did in the year 2006, and we definitely changed that out. We thought we were choosing something that was not going to change very much, but it had in fact changed. So again, you wouldn't notice a huge difference in the branding. You don't want to really, the brand is still intact, but the logo sort of shifts with the updates with contemporary times. So,
Yeah, you made an interesting point there, and I think maybe that's sometimes what causes confusion in whether the difference between refreshes and redesigns is because to me a refresh can also include color changes and font changes and
yeah,
things like that because it's not core to the underlying
yeah,
code of the site, the structure of the site. It's visual, it's refreshing some of
yes,
your branding and things like that. But again, so that could be part of a refresh, but it's
that's true.
definitely part of a redesign when you do
Yes,
it. So it is part. It could be part of both. So
yeah,
to me, the difference between the two, a refresh, you could be refreshing colors and fonts. You'll probably be rethinking about some visuals and updating those content and how you present and speak, tones, things like that. All would be part of a refresh, and then a redesign. You could also change all of those things, but the redesign includes bigger changes to the overall layouts of the
Yeah.
theme, and the header and the footer, and how things are structured, or even changing platforms from WordPress to something else, or those types of things are much bigger tasks as part of a redesign.
You're changing people from WordPress to other platforms?
I'm just giving an example. Never leave WordPress.
Yeah, it's more like move them
I
off
mean,
of
there
Square.
are other content management systems. I'm just acknowledging that there are others.
That's true. That's true. Fair, fair.
Further to the difference between a refresh and a redesign, for me, I would say you would want to refresh your site potentially yearly, with just keeping up with how your business changes and grows. Redesign to me is more like a 4 or 5 year process, where you might want to, after 4 or 5 years, think about, okay, is the technology we're using for the site still the right thing, or is there changes in web design and presentation,
Yeah.
that we need to get on board with, that kind of thing. So you'll refresh your site much more often than you redesign. But that's the time frame I typically talk with clients about.
Yeah, I'd say we're pretty much on that. I think a redesign, we try and pull it out a little bit further. So we're using fairly stable platform now, like the theme files. So we're not having to change it out quite as often. If you look up on Google, I think the last time I looked up, it said 3 to 5 years is the lifespan of a WordPress site. I don't think that's exactly right, but it is a good guidance. And especially if you've purchased a premium theme in the days ago where you bought it off of ThemeForest, sometimes those ones can go a bit faster because the developer who developed it has walked away from that project and they're not providing updates anymore. But if you're working with a solid developer, generally speaking, they're choosing themes that are from reputable companies, and they're updating them regularly. They're updating all the third-party software regularly. So then you can even stretch that time span out to 7 years if you're really on a budget, and you're making the content changes more regularly. Then you could do it anywhere between 5 and 7 years. But definitely, I start checking websites that come to me that were developed previously. I'll start checking them at 3 years for sure. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why some of the very highly customizable theme that I use, and I know you use this as well. Um, the reason why I like using it and other themes like it is because there's a large developer network behind it. And so you can use that theme that's highly customizable to build out virtually anything you need to. But the theme itself continually gets progressed over
That's
the
right.
years, versus if you just went to theme forest, like you said, and you bought a theme that maybe is not getting developed anymore. It's going to be good maybe for 3 to 5 years, and then you're
Yeah.
probably going to have to change because nothing's happening to it. Whereas this theme that we tend to gravitate to for most of our projects now is constantly being updated, and
Yeah.
so it will theoretically be fine in another 10 years as long as that development continues. And
That's
you'll just have to do like refresh and tweaks and things like that.
that's right.
You would only need to be doing a rebuild if the customer really wanted things to be like drastically different than what it is. But you could still use the same theme, but
That's
you would
right.
redevelop in a new style for whatever
Right.
that business's purposes are.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So you want to start with a theme that's robust, is what I call it, and
Mhm.
has longevity built into the way that the business model is organized. And I think that's key to having a longer website and having one that's flexible enough, as you said, to make changes on a more regular, ongoing style rather than having to throw out everything and start from almost from scratch actually every time you redevelop. So that's good. So I think our next, I just want to move us along because actually I don't even know what time we started going live because
Yeah,
I didn't look at
probably
the.
5 or 7 minutes after. So
Yeah,
we've maybe got 10 minutes or so to go.
yeah, okay, great. So setting clear goals for your redesign. So some of the things that you want to make sure that you're not just making it pretty, you're actually paying attention to your business goals because the way that we interact and the way that we organize websites changes every time, every so often. And so, user experience, we learn things about user experience. And so the idea of user experience changes. Also, if we're changing our business, evolving our business so that we're offering different offerings to begin with, then that funnel needs to change and how we push people through our website. And we also have to think about top funnel. Where do we put those people through our website? And then mid funnel and bottom funnel. So we have to actually organize for that. So at one time we used to get like really fixated on founder stories and what our motivation is and how we help our clients. But now it's really focused on the client journey. So we want to organize our site for that client funnel. Like, who are they, and how are we moving that particular client through our funnel versus top funnel and bottom funnel? And so we want to think about that as our primary reason for or the design should really organize around those ideas. So your business goals are front and center. They're not an afterthought. We're not worried about, like, I find it kind of amusing when I get people and they've come up with, I want this page, I want this page, and I want this page. And I'm like, well, let's work out your content and your business goals first. And then we decide how we move people through your website because web, web websites really aren't about having completely distinct pages in the way that you think about it always. So
Mm.
and on some pages, although we do, and we also want to consider the SEO impact, right? So if you've had your first site, you might want to have a bigger focus on developing your organic SEO on the second go round. And so therefore, you're going to be thinking about that site quite differently. So a developer, a designer, or whoever's in charge of rebuilding your site will bring that to the table. So what you want to be clear about as a business owner is, what are your goals? Who's your target market, and and how are we going to talk to those people? And you might not even need to know that piece, but you just need to understand that we're going to speak to those people quite differently throughout your site. So we want to be able to capture all of that. So yeah, so from that, um, yeah, and I guess that actually organizes how we streamline the back end functionality to support that. So all of the content writing, all of the functionality on your website should really be supporting that user experience flow and those funnels basically.
Mhm.
Do you have
Mhm.
Was there anything that you think I missed on that section? Because
No, I mean, just to recap, you went through a lot of stuff. All of it I agree with. So, yeah, basically, you're looking at why you're doing this is because you want to improve your user experience for people. You want to, generate more leads or sales. You want to
yeah,
up your SEO game and be found.
yeah,
Or maybe your brand tone has changed and you just need to reflect that. But again, I think you reiterated it on more important points to these is that you need to have the ideas before doing all these things. Why are you doing this and stuff like that. So these are the things you have to do. But
yeah.
Rena's really trying to hit home that you have to define why you're doing these before you actually do these.
Yeah. In fact, we had this really fun instance just the other day because we built a brand new website from scratch. And we don't always get to do it in this direction, but we actually sent the client on a writing. She's a coach and a very good writer, so we had her do a whole pile of writing on what it is that she does and why, and we just asked all the questions. And and that and and in that, and because we were able to do that piece with her, which most people send us content already, or they say just go get it from the website, the current website, because we were able to do that and provide that to the designer. The designer really was able to pull out some of the most sophisticated funnels that I've seen yet. And it was really quite a beautiful, it's a really beautiful site. I love it. It's just sort of pulls people through. You really get good understanding of the brand voice and the design. And some of it I would have edited down, but this woman is a complex woman and her communication style is that. And so she's going to really appeal to people who are like me and love that style of communication. And it's done in such a beautiful way. So starting off with the content first, not organized, is great. That it just added such a neat element. And I've
Hmm.
seen people in the old school, and I used to do this myself before we used to organize digitally. Sometimes when I'm stuck and when I'm doing my own site, I take concepts and ideas of my business, put them on post-it notes, and then I start mapping them out in little clouds on the wall. Where should this go? What should that go? How does this funnel down? And that's kind of a really great way of working when you have the opportunity to do so. Sometimes we're just pushed for time and we're just given the content and we can't do that sort of depth of work, but that's actually a really nice way of thinking about how to come up with something that's really great. That's sort of like another layer. Um, because I was also asked a few weeks ago to provide, a template that somebody could just pop content into. And I really feel like that's a backwards way of working. Like it's really content first in my mind, because goals, content based on those goals, and then build the UX design through it. It works, I feel works the best.
Hmm.
Um, so then our next topic, oh, sorry, did you have something to add to that?
Uh,
I,
no,
oh,
no, but it's 11:30. I know we'll probably only have maybe 5
5 minutes.
or 7 minutes, and I did want to
Hmm.
possibly touch on, the launching of
Yes.
a redesign or a refreshed site, or the differences, because a refresh, you're not actually redesigning and rebuilding, you're just updating pages, content. So there is a difference, I guess.
Yeah.
And now that I'm thinking of it, typically when I refresh, I don't really consider much other than going to the page and refreshing it. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
Do you consider anything when you're making changes, like a refresh change?
Yeah. So if sometimes when I do a refresh change, I'm also changing up the SEO significantly. So we'll resubmit the sitemap to get that process going a little bit faster. So that's one thing. Um, Sometimes we'll also add in, if you're doing a refresh, I'll add in, or I'll try and get the client to add in tag manager so that you're ready to go for a more closer um, segmenting of your Google Analytics. That can be really handy. And I'll also add in um, what's the other one? Microsoft Clarity, so that I can see where people are dropping off, because it helps me say, hey, we've done this refresh for you. Now that I look at it, I think we should add another button at this point in the page. Or now that I look at how people are using it, maybe they're dropping off at this point. Maybe we need a little bit less information in this section here, or maybe we need to build out this information with clarity in mind into separate pieces. So sometimes I'll do that because that helps me help the client um, ongoing, rather than just once and done and not look at it again.
Hmm.
So those things I'll do, but not too much other than that, other than those couple of things to help manage.
Yeah, and what you were just talking about really speaks to, just keeping track of and monitoring the things that you're changing. Are they working? Are they not working?
Yeah,
Did I make something, or did I
yeah,
introduce something that it, you know, made something wrong.
Yeah.
Obviously, anytime
Sometimes,
you're doing a refresh or a redesign, you want
yeah,
to make sure you're on top of what changes to the overall
yeah,
traffic to your site is, your drop off, anything like that. Did it impact outreach? Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely track and
yeah.
monitor after this type of thing.
Yeah. In fact,
Um,
it's actually made me adjust my packages so that when I sell an ongoing recurring package, I build in time in my month so that I can actually have the space to view things and get back to clients with my insights and recommendations. I think that's super
mhm.
important. So, and specifically with my Google Ads clients, I no longer do the cheapo Google Ads packages where they're just the auto report is sent out and that's it. I really spend the time looking, and I always send an insights and recommendations section because I feel like that's just adding way more value for the client than simply reporting on results. So our last topic was, I think, did we get that, designing for today's users?
We didn't.
Right.
I don't know if we went into like complete detail, but we basically mentioned UX and keeping design in mind. But I know you had some things that you like to point out that are dead giveaways of old sites or things you should change
Oh yeah.
that would pertain
Oh
to UX.
yeah, that's a great thing to end on. So when Greg says if you go to your site and it looks outdated, one of my questions was, oh, what does it look like when a site is outdated? So I created a little mini list for you. So if you have sliders in the banner area, that's people are moving away from that because it increases the load time and not very great for your SEO. Even when they work well for a user experience, they don't work well on a technical side of it. If you do have sliders anywhere, sometimes people have little sliders, manual sliders that you click for testimonials at the bottom. If they move clunky or they have odd transitions, that's another way to think about it. If you have outdated fonts, so you might not know the ones that are outdated, but there is that sort of one that all the hipsters use that's really tall and it looks like it's hand drawn. That came out somewhere around 2005 or something, and I loved
Is
it
that
when I
the
first.
is that the all caps one that's tall and thin,
I
or
I think that might be right, but I no, I think they do have a low.
a
Maybe
lowercase
you're right.
version?
I can't say, but you'll know it. It looks hand drawn. It's very tall and narrow. And it was
Yeah.
all the rage. It came out everywhere. I actually loved it and fell for it too. When I saw it, I used it on a few things for clients. But those types of fonts are really better used in the social sphere if it works with your brand
Mhm.
as a complementary font rather than putting it onto your website because that will definitely outdate your site pretty quickly.
Mhm.
If you haven't updated your testimonials, so if all of the Google testimonials are like sometimes Google has a date with them when you pull them onto your website. If they all are from 2019, then that's probably a sign that your whole website needs to be refreshed. Or if your blog posts are old, you can just sometimes I just remove the dates from my blog posts, but what's really best is if that also indicates, like if you haven't added a blog in a long time, then chances are you haven't looked at your website in a while either.
Mhm.
You mentioned already if it doesn't adapt for mobile, that's a super, super big red flag because so many people are now using mobile first.
Mhm.
And then if you made it yourself, if you made it yourself, probably time, and you haven't done anything for 5 years, maybe now's the time to put a little marketing budget behind that and get that up to date. Or if you're on Squarespace or Wix, it's a great place to start. I do help people who are on Squarespace and Wix. We have done refreshes on Wix and Squarespace for clients, but chances are, if you started on Squarespace or Wix, you designed it yourself or did it yourself, and you just need a refresh. Or if you've got the budget, do a redesign and get a professional in there to help because it really does it really does stand out. We can all tell when you've done it yourself, even if you've used a beautiful theme. There are little, the biggest hallmark is if you've centered all of your text. That's the one that I love the most. If all the
Yeah,
font graphs, if you've got paragraphs of text and they're all centered and not left aligned, I know you've done it yourself.
yeah. Pro tip: I've been designing websites for over 20 years, and I never center any text. So
Some, well,
yeah, I mean,
sometimes,
there's the odd time I will center text
yeah,
under an image maybe or something like that. But
or
yeah,
headings. That's the other one I do sometimes, headings. But,
yeah,
but paragraphs should not be centered ever. It just screams, I did it myself.
not long paragraphs.
Yeah, yeah, any of them.
Okay, well, I think we got through all that.
Yeah. So next
I
week,
Yeah. Do you know what's next week?
I'm just pulling up the document. We've got next week, we have, oh yeah, we have Phelan and myself. We'll be discussing web accessibility best practices, legal and ethical necessities. So that's going
Oh,
to be a
perfect.
good one because as British Columbia increases its legislation, right now it's mostly just government sites and sites that pertain to government. So if you want to be a what do you call it, a service provider to government, or you want to go in for a public private partnership in any way, then you're going to need to get your site up to date. And I was really quite interested in the stat that it's 30%. You can increase your target market by 30% by creating an accessible website. That's quite a lot of traffic, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's great. So join us next time. Wherever you're seeing this right now is where you can come back. We come here every time at 9-ish, I'm going to say, because we have been having our our platform is not performing in the way that it's expected. So we have been starting a few minutes late over the last little while. So come
That would
back
be
and next week,
11
11
a.m.
Pacific
Yeah,
time. Yeah.
Pacific
All
time.
right. Thanks for joining us. As always,
Thanks, everyone.
if you have questions, pop them in the comment section. And if you want to join our community, we are in the Business Marketing Mixer group on Facebook. See you there. Have a good week.
Bye.